Hello and welcome you all to my channel Know Your Eyes. Today I'm going to discuss a very important topic, that is diplopia. Diplopia, as we all know, is one of the most common binocular vision anomalies that we get to see quite often in our clinic. So we need to understand the concept of diplopia very well so that we can proceed with the appropriate investigations and treatment. So what is diplopia? Diplopia basically means double vision. It's a Greek word where diplos means double and obs means eyes. Now basically what happens when a normal individual is viewing a particular object, then that object is forming its similar kind of images in the corresponding retinal points. So those two images which are forming in each retina of the eyes are getting transmitted to the visual cortex of the brain, where the brain is fusing those two images, and thereby the individual is able to appreciate one image of that one object. And that's how we all the people are seeing the different objects around us. And this is what we call sensory fusion. But in case if the brain is not able to merge the two images, then what happens? The individual sees two images instead of one image of one particular object. Okay, and that's what we call diplopia. Therefore, we consider diplopia as one of the most significant binocular vision anomalies, because here the two eyes are failing to work as a team. So therefore here the patient complains of seeing two images simultaneously instead of one image, as opposed to haplopia. So haplopia is just the opposite of diplopia, where an individual is able to appreciate one image of one object, which is normal. Now there are different kinds of diplopia which we have to understand, because the patient may come with a complaint of diplopia, but unless we understand the type of diplopia the patient is suffering from, we won't be able to understand the required investigations and the treatment of that patient. So the first kind of diplopia is monocular diplopia. So from the very name we can understand that the patient is appreciating double vision with one eye. Here, the images may appear as repetitive or ghosting. Repetitive images means where a particular stimulus or a particular object is giving rise to more than two images, because usually diplopia means we understand two images, double vision. In repetitive images, what happens? There can be multiple images occurring in front of the eye. And this usually happens in condition like cerebral polyopia. It is also called cerebral diplopia, where what happens, in the presence of the stimulus, the patient will be able to perceive multiple images, and this will persist even if the stimulus is removed from the physical space. So this happens in case of cerebral polyopia. It is in case of monocular diplopia, we have to understand that it happens due to some ocular disorder, and it is not neurological. Okay, so therefore monocular diplopia, if taking place in a patient, then we have to understand that there is nothing to do with any cranial nerves or any visual pathway defects. It is all about some ocular disorder which we have to find out in our further examination. Monocular diplopia can be unilateral or can be bilateral. Unilateral diplopia means, suppose the patient is complaining of double vision in right eye. In this case, what happens, if we ask the patient to cover his left eye and see a particular object, the patient will complain of diplopia of that object. Okay, suppose if I ask the patient to look at the 660 letter of the Snellen's chart, for example E, the patient will see two E's over there with right eye. Whereas when I ask the patient to cover the right eye, then with the left eye he doesn't appreciate any diplopia. So we can understand the diplopia is unilateral in this case, only right eye has diplopia. But bilateral is when the patient will have diplopia in each eye alternately. Okay, binocularly the patient may not appreciate diplopia, but when the patient is covering one eye at a time, the other eye appreciates diplopia. That means if the patient covers his left eye, the right eye appreciates diplopia. If the right eye is covered, the left eye appreciates diplopia. So once we know that the patient is suffering from monocular diplopia, we have to dig in further to investigate the cause which is actually responsible for that monocular diplopia occurring to that patient. Because one thing we have to remember, that when there is monocular diplopia taking place, we have to understand that there is nothing neurological in this. Okay, there is no neurological pathology involved in monocular diplopia. It is all to do with your ocular disorder, any kind of ocular pathology, which has to be further investigated. And another thing we have to remember, that in case of ocular pathology, either of these three phenomena will take place that will lead to monocular diplopia. The first phenomena is light diffraction, secondly metamorphopsia, and third is cerebral polyopia. So cerebral polyopia I already have mentioned before in case of repetitive images taking place in monocular diplopia. So either of these three phenomena taking place in this list of causes which I have given here, like in cataract being one of the most common causes causing monocular diplopia, especially in the early senile cataract where the lens just begins to turn opaque. So as a result, what happens, because of this uneven transparency of the lens, the light diffracting through this, the light diffraction that is taking place through the lens is actually stimulating the foveal point of that same eye as well as the extrafoveal point of that same eye itself. So as a result, what happens, the not so clear image or a ghost image which is forming in the extrafoveal point of that affected eye is overlapping with a comparatively clear image which is forming at the foveal point of the same eye. So due to that overlapping, what happens, the image seems to get doubled, okay, and the patient therefore appreciates diplopia in one eye. Anisoconia is another cause which actually refers to the difference in the retinal image size. Then tear film insufficiency, which is actually dry eye, that also leads to diplopia. Then ectopia lentis. Ectopia lentis means the dislocation of the lens, like in the second row right hand side we can see there is an upward dislocation of the lens, so obviously that will lead to monocular diplopia. Then media opacity, cataract being one of the reasons of media opacity. If there is corneal opacity also, that can also lead to monocular diplopia. Polychoria, which means more than one pupil, like in this picture I have shown you two pupils. So because of these two pupils also the light rays are falling on the different retinal points, and as a result the two images are being appreciated with one eye itself. Maculopathy, if there is any pathology in the macula, so that usually most of the time leads to metamorphopsia, but sometimes the metamorphopsia or the distortion of image is often appreciated by the patient as double vision. So that can also be another cause for monocular diplopia. And keratoconus, that is the cone-shaped cornea, is also another prime reason for monocular diplopia. So usually if in case of monocular diplopia, how can we actually differentiate that whether the diplopia is taking place due to some retinal cause or due to something else, due to media opacity or due to refractive error, anisoconia, etc. That can actually be differentiated with the help of pinhole. So usually we see that if the patient's diplopia is getting improved, okay, if the patient is not appreciating diplopia after putting a pinhole in front of his affected eye, that means either the patient is having some refractive error problem or maybe some media opacity, okay, like that, or maybe polychoria, etc. But if the patient's diplopia is not getting improved with the presence of pinhole, that means it is a matter of retinal pathology. So like that we have to differentiate and go about with the treatment accordingly. So now coming to binocular diplopia. Binocular diplopia means where the double vision is appreciated by the patient with both the eyes open. That means when either of the two eyes is occluded, the binocular diplopia disappears. Okay, there is no diplopia, it resolves. So that actually helps us to conclude that it is a case of binocular diplopia and not monocular diplopia. Now there are various kinds of binocular diplopia. So let's start with the physiological diplopia. From the very name it suggests that it is physiological, it is nothing pathological. That means it happens with every individual. We can even try this out at home with very simple experiments. Physiological diplopia I've already explained in details in my previous presentations. You can refer to the links in the description box. It can be of two types, either homonymous or heteronymous. Homonymous is when the stimulus is situated behind the Panam's fusional space. Then it leads to homonymous diplopia because it actually leads to binasal retinal disparity. That's why homonymous diplopia takes place. On the contrary, if the object is situated ahead of the Panam's fusional space, then that stimulates the bitemporal retinal disparate points, which again leads to heteronymous diplopia or crossed images. Now, one very important point to remember that actually differentiates the physiological diplopia from other kinds of binocular diplopia is that in physiological diplopia, the object which is appearing diplopic are non-fixated objects. These are very important because here we are not getting the double vision of the object that we are fixating at. Okay, the object that we are seeing is appearing single to us. It is the object which is lying beyond the Panam's fusional space is actually appearing double to us, okay, not the one that we are fixating at. So therefore the object which is appearing double to us, if we again fixate at that particular object, then that physiological diplopia will totally disappear. So this is one very important thing which differentiates the physiological diplopia from the other kinds of binocular diplopia. So what are the points to be noted? Just to recap, the object is positioned beyond the Panam's area of fusion and is non-fixated. This is a very, very important thing that differentiates a physiological diplopia from pathological diplopia, that the object has to be a non-fixated object which is giving rise to diplopia. Next is the retinal disparity of the non-fixated object is beyond the fusional limit. It is directly proportional to the distance between the object appearing diplopic and the plane of fixation. So the more the object which is appearing diplopic is away from the plane of fixation, the more is going to be the degree of diplopia. Egocentric directions of diplopic images are perceived as though both monocular components had paired images on corresponding points in the contralateral eye. Egocentric directions means the visual directions of the diplopic images. So what happens when we appreciate two images, when we are appreciating double vision, that time it seems as if each image is having its corresponding visual axis which is connecting them with the retinal point. So it seems like there is a monocular component of visual axis, okay, which are having the paired images on corresponding points in the contralateral eye. But even then, there is no fusion taking place, and it's absolutely a natural consequence. As I said, that's why it is physiological. Well, now coming to pathological diplopia. Pathological means which is not physiological. That means it is to do with the visual axis misalignment, and that can only happen in strabismus. So therefore it is also called strabismus induced diplopia. In congenital strabismus, diplopia gets resolved due to anomalous retinal correspondence. This I've already explained in my previous presentation. You may please refer to the presentations. Now in case of congenital strabismus, there won't be any diplopia eventually because of a gradual establishment of the harmonious anomalous retinal correspondence there. But in case of acquired strabismus, diplopia may take place, and the diplopia can be horizontal. That means the two images that you see can be either horizontally placed, or those two images can be vertically separated from each other, or it can also be torsional. Horizontal diplopia happens if there is lateral rectus or medial rectus palsy, because these two muscles are responsible for the horizontal movement of our eye. Okay, and for example, in case of lateral rectus palsy, the nerve which supplies the lateral rectus is the sixth cranial nerve, which is the abducens nerve. So if the abducens nerve is affected, then that will cause paralysis of the lateral rectus muscle. So naturally the abduction will be restricted. Okay, the patient will not be able to abduct his eyes. In case of dextroversion or in case of levoversion, there will be restriction in the movement. So therefore diplopia will happen, and the diplopia will be horizontal in that case. And the diplopia can also be vertical or torsional if the cyclovertical extraocular muscles are affected. Cyclovertical muscles means like superior inferior rectus and superior inferior oblique. For example, if the fourth cranial nerve is affected. Fourth cranial nerve is the trochlear nerve, which is supplying the superior oblique muscle. So naturally, the diplopia taking place in that case can either be vertical or can also be torsional. And if the diplopia is either vertical or torsional, then we have to understand that it is the palsy of third cranial nerve, which is the oculomotor nerve, because the third cranial nerve is actually supplying most of the extraocular muscles. As we know, it supplies the medial rectus muscle, the superior rectus, the inferior rectus, and the inferior oblique. So all these muscles are being supplied by the oculomotor nerve, and all these muscles are having their different primary, secondary, and tertiary actions. Okay, because some of these muscles are responsible for the horizontal movement of our eyes, that is the horizontal versions, and some of these muscles are responsible for the vertical versions. So as a result, if oculomotor nerve is affected, then the diplopia can either be vertical or horizontal. Now we know that there are two types of manifest strabismus. One is comitant strabismus, another is incomitant strabismus. Comitant strabismus means non-paralytic, that means where the cranial nerve palsy is not involved. As a result, the angle of deviation remains same in all the 9 cardinal positions of case. Whereas in case of incomitant strabismus, there is cranial nerve palsy involved. Okay, that's why it is also called paralytic strabismus. As a result, the angle of deviation varies in all the 9 cardinal positions of case. So let's take this example. This is a very beautiful pictorial representation of an unilateral cranial nerve palsy. So here the right eye has been considered. In the first case, we can say it is right oculomotor nerve palsy. In the second case, it is right trochlear nerve palsy. And in the third case, it is right abducens nerve palsy. Now, in case of oculomotor nerve palsy, we first have to understand that which are the muscles innervated by oculomotor nerve. Oculomotor nerve innervates the medial rectus, superior rectus, inferior rectus, and inferior oblique. Along with that, it also innervates the levator palpebrae superioris, which is LPS. Okay, so that means we can understand that if there is a third nerve palsy, then the affected eye will be exotropic as well as a little hypotropic. Okay, and there will be an associated ptosis as well. So we can see here in the first picture, the patient is doing dextroversion. Okay, so here the right eye, okay, which is the affected eye, has no problem in abduction. Okay, because the lateral rectus is fully functional. Okay, here medial rectus has nothing to do, so therefore the patient can very well look to his right. So there is a small angle of horizontal squint here. Whereas when the patient is looking straight ahead, that is the primary position of his gaze, then we can see the right eye is exotropic with an associated hypotropia, as well as some degree of ptosis also we can see here. Okay, so this itself indicates that there is a third nerve palsy. In the third one, we can see that the patient is doing levoversion. The patient is looking to his left. Now here, the left eye can abduct very easily, whereas the right eye is not able to abduct because the medial rectus is not functioning. Okay, medial rectus is paralyzed because of oculomotor nerve. Okay, so as a result, there is an inability of abduction in the right eye. So therefore here the angle of squint will be big. Okay, there will be a larger angle of deviation, and the patient will also appreciate a higher degree of diplopia in this case. So this we'll be discussing further in details when I'll be presenting you the diplopia charting. In the second one, we can see it is right fourth nerve palsy, that is trochlear nerve. Now, trochlear nerve innervates the superior oblique muscle. So, when the patient is looking to his right, there is no obvious angle of deviation noticed. In case of primary position of gaze, the right eye is hypertropic, okay, because we know that the function of superior oblique, the primary function of superior oblique is depression. So here the right eye is getting elevated as superior oblique muscle is not working, okay. And in case of levoversion, we can see that there is an inferior oblique overaction because the superior oblique is not working. There is trochlear nerve palsy. As a result, the patient's right eye elevates more, okay, in case of adduction, because in case of inferior oblique overaction or IOOA, what happens, the eyeball moves a lot inward in case of when the eye elevates, okay, and it moves medially. Fine. So therefore, in this particular position of case, the double vision will be much more. In case of right abducens nerve palsy, There is an inability of adduction in the right eye because lateral rectus is affected. So there will be a large angle of squint when the patient will do dextroversion, because in dextroversion the right eye will not be able to abduct because of lateral rectus palsy. In case of primary position of gaze, the right eye will automatically turn inward, so there will be a right eye esotropia. And in case of livoversion, again, the right eye will be able to adduct because the medial rectus is fully functional, okay, and the lateral rectus has got nothing to do here in this particular position of gaze. So as a result, we don't notice any obvious squint here. So in this case, the first picture in the first position of gaze, that means in case of dextroversion during abducens nerve palsy, the patient will appreciate a higher degree of diplopia. So all these things in details we'll be discussing during diplopia charting when I'll be coming it up with in my next presentation. Now, though the cranial nerve pulses have reportedly been found to be the commonest cause of the binocular diplopia occurring in patients, there can be other causes as well that lead to the occurrence of binocular diplopia. And some of those causes have been listed here, like thyroid disorder. In case of thyroid disorder, you can see in the first picture that the patient has upper lid retraction with exophthalmic eyes. Okay, there is proptosis in both the eyes. So as a result, what happens, this proptosed eye causes a kind of stiffness or restriction in the movement of the eye. So as a result, diplopia happens. In fact, in case of hyperthyroidism, diplopia has been found to be the first ocular manifestations taking place. Next is myasthenia gravis. Myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder where the neuromuscular junction is affected. Okay, here what happens, the neurotransmitter, for example acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter traveling from the nerve to the muscles, fails to bind with the receptors of the muscles. As a result, enough impulse from the nerve doesn't reach the muscle properly. Okay, that's because the receptors on the muscles get destroyed by the antibody. So as a result, the muscles become weak due to lack of stimulus being received. So that is another cause of diplopia. Next is giant cell arteritis, which actually affects the large to medium sized arteries. The retinal arteries, the ciliary arteries get affected here. And there can be, apart from diplopia, there can also be symptoms like jaw claudication, then temporal headache. Okay, there can be temporal swelling in the artery. So all these things can be seen in giant cell arteritis. Multiple sclerosis is again another autoimmune disorder where the myelin sheath is affected. Okay, the myelin sheath, which actually covers the central nervous system, okay, covers the neurons of the central nervous system, that myelin sheath gets affected. So it is the demyelination that actually affects the neurons. As a result, because of improper flow of the impulses, the muscles do not act, and as a result the diplopia take place. Okay, so ptosis can happen in this case. In case of multiple sclerosis, there is an injection which is called hydrophonium chloride. So if that injection is given and if the patient shows any improvement with that injection, then that itself establishes the presence of multiple sclerosis in that patient. Orbital tumor again leads to diplopia. It depends on the location of the orbital tumor, the position, the size of the tumor, because accordingly it depends that which muscle is getting affected because of the tumor. Okay, so in case if the tumor is exerting too much of pressure on the orbital floor, then the inferior oblique has got the maximum chance to get affected. So there can be diplopia taking place because of that. Trauma like blowout fracture, blunt trauma, post-surgical complications can also give rise to binocular diplopia. Diabetes again is one of the very common cause of diplopia, and supranuclear lesions. Now this is literally a beautiful slide that summarizes the entire concept of diplopia through a flowchart that I have been explaining to you so far. If you go through this, the entire concept of diplopia will be absolutely clear to you. Here the diplopia has been classified into monocular diplopia and binocular diplopia, as I have explained before. Monocular diplopia again depends on the kind of images being appreciated and how to differentiate the cause of monocular diplopia, that whether it is taking place due to any retinal pathology or due to refractive error with the help of pinhole and blinking. Okay, so you can go through this. Then the binocular diplopia, whenever we talk about binocular diplopia, the first thing coming to our mind is the alignment of the visual axis. Now here I would like to mention one thing, that in my other slide, in my previous slides, I have explained about the strabismus induced diplopia, which involves misalignment of the visual axis. Now there can be binocular diplopia present even with the eyes being properly aligned. Okay, even if there is no strabismus, binocular diplopia can be present. Now that depends on the kind of images being appreciated. If the images are dissimilar, which usually happens due to metamorphopsia, then that is because of any kind of macular pathology or retinal diseases taking place. And if the images appreciated are similar, okay, then we have to see whether they are constant or intermittent. If it is constant, then it's physiological diplopia, because here the visual axis is perfectly aligned and there is normal retinal correspondence also present. Okay, so therefore this is physiological. But if the diplopia is intermittent, okay, it's not taking place every time, then it can be due to multiple sclerosis, myasthenia gravis, or there can be decompensating phoria. Decompensating phoria is a very common thing. It can be found in almost every individual who are doing lots of near work. In mostly the young individuals, we can see doing a lot of near work, okay, who are suffering from accommodative spasm, okay, or they can appreciate this intermittent diplopia due to maybe intermittent exophoria. Okay, again there can be Vergence anomalies as well, which also breaks the fusion very soon, and therefore the patient can appreciate diplopia during your work. So these are some of the conditions where intermittent diplopia takes place. And in case of misalignment of the visual axis, comitant and non-comitant strabismus, that I've already explained before. So you can just go through this chart and have a very clear concept of diplopia. Thanks a lot for watching my video. Hope this helps you in getting a clear concept of diplopia. And if you have any questions or queries, then please come up with that in the comment section. And please subscribe to my channel for more new updates. See you soon with my next presentations. Till then, please take care.